Good evening and welcome to the inaugural Authors in Conversation presented by La Dame d'Escaffier's New York chapter. We are still admitting a number of people into the room. So I will like to start by acknowledging all the people who have been involved with this event and share some information about La Dame d'Escaffier. First of all, my name is Melanie Young. I am a member of the New York chapter of La Dame d'Escaffier and a past president of the chapter. I want to welcome all of you to this event. I'd like to extend a thank you first and foremost to my co-chair for this program, Dame Joyce Appelman, who is on with me. And we'll be taking questions and vetting questions from all the attendees as we proceed into the second part of the conversation. We've allowed a full hour for it, starting with a conversation between our two illustrious authors and speakers, and then we will take, of course, and encourage questions from all of the wonderful attendees. I want to thank everybody who has signed up. We have over 50 attendees. I want to thank the Programs Committee for La Dame d'Escaffier and the Communications Committee, and specifically shout out to Dame Francine Cohen for all of her hard work, and to Lorea, who is helping to monitor this discussion so that we all can be free to speak and just really have a great engagement. For those of you who are not familiar with La Dame d'Escaffier, I do want to share its mission. La Dame d'Escaffier is a 501c3 nonprofit international organization of leading women in food, fine beverage, and hospitality. Our mission is advocacy, philanthropy, education, mentoring, and scholarships for women to help them through their careers. The New York chapter is the founding chapter. It was founded by the late Carla Brock, who wanted to create an organization of women in the cooking profession. At the time that she envisioned this several decades ago, there were only men's organizations and women were not allowed into them. So Carol, who was the most feisty woman I've ever met, decided she was going to create an organization called Les Dames d'Escaffier, because there was only a Les Mis d'Escaffier, which is men. Since then, La Dame d'Escaffier has grown into, I think it's almost 40, maybe over 40 chapters, and has encompassed women of every aspect of this profession. Most of our programs are open to members or non-members, so we encourage people to follow us at Les Dames New York, and our website is www.ldny.org. Again, this event we have priced very reasonably because we want to encourage you to buy the book, but 100% of all admissions and any voluntary contributions in addition to your admission to this event will go to the La Dame d'Escaffier Scholarship Program. We work with many fine schools in the New York City area and have helped further careers of many amazing women, many of whom have gone on to be very successful, and some have now become La Dames themselves. So it's a great honor to be a part of this organization, and it's a great honor to present this concept, which Joyce and I conceived because we hadn't done a book event. We wanted to be more than a book club. We wanted to be a conversation because women are really shaping the narrative of what it means to be a woman in the food, fine beverage, and hospitality. We've been shaping the narrative all along, but not always have people been listening. But they are now, because we have so many amazing women in every aspect of the industry doing incredible things. What is important is why, and that's why we decided to start this program with this book, Lindsay Gardner's Why We Cook, Women on Food, Identity, and Connection. It's published by Workman. And of course, for those of you who've attended, Workman has very kindly offered a special discount, which you can take advantage of. So we want to thank Workman Publishing for helping support our effort. We chose Why We Cook because we want to talk about the why we are all here. Every single one of us attending this event has a why as to why we're in this profession. We're all connected because we have a passion for food, fine beverage, and hospitality. Food is a connector. And we are connecting here today. And this book, Why We Cook, connects. And what's so important is it really shapes that narrative, because Lindsay spent years interviewing over 122 women. 112 are featured in this book from every aspect of the business. In a time where diversity, equity, gender, inclusion, divisiveness, social justice, sustainability, economic impact, environmental impact, political impact, and every other topic is as front and center, health and nutrition, of course, front and center as any could be right now. This book has a lot of relevance because the women in it are amazing. And it really shows that we have the why behind us to help change the narrative and make an impact. Food is about nourishment. It's about tradition. It is about history. It is about family. It is about serving those you care about. It's about serving your community. It's about changing how we eat, what we think about food, and how to protect the amazing resources we have. It is about coming together at the table, whether you agree or disagree on how you live. Everyone can agree they love to eat and they live to eat. And that is evident in Why We Cook, Women on Food, Identity, and Connection. And I hope if you've read this book, you will agree. And if you haven't, I encourage you. The stories are inspiring. We asked Lindsay, who I will officially address, to select one of her contributors to the book, and she has selected the esteemed Dr. Jessica B. Harris. So we are so honored. Jessica is a dame. The two dynamics are going to be great. This will be a conversation between them. I will briefly say a little bit about both and ask a few questions to Lindsay, and then I'm going to hand the floor to her to have a conversation with Dr. Harris. Lindsay Gardner is a talented artist. Her illustrations can be seen throughout Why We Cook. Her illustrations and her art can be seen in many magazines, and she brings to life the story through art. It's incredible, really talented. During her work, we discover, if you read Why We Cook, that recent studies found that while women held 49% of entry-level food industry positions, only 23.9% of chefs and head cooks were women. And Black, Indigenous, and other women of color made up an even smaller slice of that percentage. We want to change that and help build and enable women to find their way in this industry. That is a why behind La Dame d'Escoffier, and I think a why as we talk about this discussion. Of course, what can we say about Dr. Jessica Harris? She's amazing. She is the leading expert on the African diaspora in the United States, and author of many award-winning books that have all been inducted into the James Beard Foundation Hall of Fame. 18 books. She is a scholar, an educator. She has written for numerous publications. She has helped consult and conceptualize the award-winning cafeteria of the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. We could go on, but I will let Lindsay take that on. But what is important is, if you don't know now and you haven't been reading or following it, her groundbreaking book, High on the Hog, A Culinary Journey from Africa to America, has now been made into a 4-part Netflix series, which I just binged and was gaga. It was incredible. This is one of the most important books that teaches Americans through the lens of Black people's food and foodways, how important their lives have shaped how we eat. It is an amazing narrative, an important connection that teaches us the significance of the African American cook, particularly the woman cook, in our culture. So we're super honored to have Dr. Harris. I know she's in high demand. Lindsay, thank you so much for making this happen. I'm going to start this with the question, why did you decide to write Why We Cook?
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for inviting me to be here to present the book, and thank you, Dr. Harris, for joining me in this conversation, especially at such a completely wild and full time in your life. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm very honored to be able to talk with you tonight. So why did I write this book? Well, it really started in my kitchen. And I've always loved to cook since I've been a grown-up on my own. But as I became a mom, sorry, let me fix my screen here. As I became a mom, my understanding of cooking and my sort of relationship to it started to change. This was almost 9 years ago. I began to ask myself questions about what I was doing when I was in the kitchen. And of course, I knew what I was doing in the kitchen, but I started to think about why it mattered so much to me and what I was passing along to my daughters and what that meant for them. I started asking myself how it was related to other creative processes that are dear to me, and how it's related to my life in my studio and painting. And the more that I became aware of those things and asking those questions of myself, the more overlaps I started to notice. And this is something that is also important to me in the rest of my practice as a painter, is just thinking about the things that we do every day and why they're meaningful and what they symbolize in a bigger sense in our lives. So I took those questions and brought them into my studio and started working on them there. But I also started extending the same questions to women in my own life, because a lot of what I was sort of trying to understand was women balance more today, arguably, than at any other time in history, with the amount of women who are in the workforce and all the different roles that we play. Yet we are often still doing the bulk of domestic labor. And there are a few statistics in Why We Cook that deal with that information. Of the almost 400 home cooks that I surveyed for the book, 90% of them still do the majority cooking in their own houses. So it's clear that women are doing more professionally, and we're also still doing the bulk of domestic labor. So I was also kind of grappling with those questions. I started to reach out to women in my own circles, my friends and peers, and then took those questions to the next step. And that was, I wanted to understand how my role as a home cook related to certainly what women in the professional culinary industry were doing. And I think that the more I started asking those questions and having those conversations, the more it became clear to me through my research that these stories were not being told or highlighted. And I so badly wanted to be able to turn to a book that brought in the perspectives of a broad range of women doing all sorts of things in the culinary industry, and read their stories and read about their achievements and learn more about how they have been impacting the culinary field. And there wasn't a book like that at that time. This was 2018. So I decided to make it. And that's really how it all started.
Lindsay, you interview women from all over the spectrum. You mentioned home cooks. You mentioned women in beverage. You mentioned women in farmers, butchers, cooks, restaurateurs, scholars. Did you find any common threads as you reached out? What were some of them?
So many. It was one of the most fulfilling parts of making the book, actually, was because each conversation was unique, and each sort of interaction was its own. At starting the research, there was no way to know sort of what would come of all of those various conversations. And over time, over the course of doing the research and having the conversations, it became very clear that there were many threads that connect the various viewpoints. And those include topics like matriarchy and race and resistance and environmental sustainability and immigration, history and preservation, all of those threads sort of came organically out of the development of the content. And I think really reinforce the sort of underlying message, or one of the underlying messages of the book, which is that there really isn't an aspect of our lives that food doesn't touch. And so, if anything, the sort of variety of various aspects of life that the content touches on underscores how interwoven food and cooking are in our lives every single day.
Lindsay, what struck me is you have women of all ages and backgrounds. I think the youngest she's probably younger. She's in her teens, right? All the way up to women in their 80s, all backgrounds. Very impressed by that. And you said that you were honored that so many, who were busy women, and they all responded excited to be a part of that.
Yes. I'm not part of the culinary industry or a food writer or journalist. And so I had no idea how it would go when I reached out to people. And it was a super thrilling part of the research. And it was also a deeply reassuring process, just from the standpoint of reaching out to people who, as you say, are completely busy, full, with their own projects and their own lives, and to have the opportunity to talk with them, interview them, understand their perspectives, and then at the next level have them contribute something to this book. It was all it's surreal still.
Well, we're honored that you have so many amazing Madame d'Escoffier members, so many, from Carla Hall to Dorie Greenspan to Tanya Holland, Anita Lowe. I could go on and on. We asked you to select someone to have a conversation with, because this is Authors in Conversation. You selected Dr. Harris. What was your reasoning behind that? And perhaps this is a great segue into your revelation and the contribution Dr. Harris has made to Why We Cook.
Well, I mean, I can't really imagine too many people who wouldn't want to be talking with Dr. Harris. So let's start there. I have admired her work for years, and Dr. Harris, you're such a trailblazer. Your work on its own is a canon of history and research and documentation of, really the basis of what we know as American food culture. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that her work really speaks for itself. But I'm so honored that she's part of the book. And I love the recipe which you included, which I know has a long history in your life. And I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about that, especially because it relates to, of course, High on the Hog, which everybody's talking about right now,
yes,
as they should be. So hi, and thank you for being here again.
Well, first of all, thank you. And earlier when we were talking about, or when Melanie was talking specifically about your ability to get everyone to participate, I think that there is a need to say, if everyone's reaction was the same as mine, we participated because of the extraordinary generosity you had in the reaching out, the way that you approached us. It wasn't just, I'd like to do an interview. It was really almost familial within that family of food. I want to talk to you, and there's an exchange going on, because I, in exchange, will give you a print of you. I mean, so it was very much an establishing of a community. My prints, by the way, I think I told you, are actually at the framer as we speak. So, I mean, I think that there was a generosity, but also a way that you established community within that community of the 112 women who appear in the book, and others who may not. So I think that's the first thing to say thank you about. I think that in terms of just the question and the recipe, first of all, the recipe that's included is chicken yassa. And anyone who follows me on Instagram, I think I have posted a mini clip of me 35 or 36 years ago on the Today Show. And what was the dish that I presented to Brian Gumbel and Willard Scott, for those of you who've got a few barnacles on your bow and can remember, was chicken yassa. So, so it's a dish that's really been kind of a good luck dish all along, up to and including just, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago. There is a posting of a video of me on the Today Show's network, today.com, cooking chicken yassa. So it's always there. And if you look at my books, and I think I told you this, it's always, if I can figure out a way to include it, there's always a variation of the recipe in some way.
Well, it's interesting. So I was trying to read all of High on the Hog before I watched the series, and I didn't quite make it through because I really couldn't stop myself from watching the series. But I did read a lot of it and plan on finishing it, of course. But there was a sentence or two in there that I hope it's okay if I'm going to read your own writing back to you, if that's okay. Where you actually describe your visit in the 70s, one of your first visits to West Africa, the island of Gorée. Is that the right pronunciation?
Correct.
And you wrote, that evening I missed the last ferry from Gorée, and I spent the night amid new friends and the island's ghosts, listening to the slap of sandals on the sandy lanes, savoring the fragrant chicken yassa that had been prepared. That night, I began to learn the tale of Gorée and the transatlantic slave trade. So, you know, of course, I've read the recipe. It's in Why We Cook. I've read it in several of your other books, but, you know, for so many reasons, reading those sentences now, after knowing you a little bit, and of course, seeing the visual adaptation of the book on screen, it just really hit home. And I was wondering if, you know, if there's something just super vivid about the recipe and the memory that go together for you, and sort of what it's come to symbolize for you, because it has become such a prominent sort of linchpin dish.
Well, I think the thing that happened, I think the thing that made it important was, and I'm going to sneeze, so I'm reaching back here, hopefully going to find
it.
Yep, this is Command Central. Everything is nearby. But I think that the whole thing is it's just sort of deeply affecting in a way, and I honestly didn't even remember that part of the book. The book was written in 2011, and I have not reread it. So people who have read it more recently know it way better than I do, and it's always a surprise when people say, "Do you know you said that?" It's like, did I? So I didn't remember that I'd had chicken yassa that night. I think another early night that I had chicken yassa, that was in, that particular evening was in 1975. I was in Senegal a time before that, in 1972, with my mother. And we were invited to someone's house for lunch. And it's somebody who I now know was probably a griot. He was a musician at the Théâtre National Daniel Sorano. And we had chicken yassa there as well. And so it was all of those things coming together. But I think the thing that made it for me was, it was the familiar combined in a way that wasn't familiar. Certainly, I knew onions, I knew chicken, I knew lemons. I had an acquaintance with hot sauce, whether or not it was habanero chili. In fact, back in the days when, when all of this was beginning, we didn't even have habanero chilies in New York City, so I didn't know that. But the idea was to take those familiar ingredients and then create something that was totally new, was part of the attraction of it. And yet it was something that was totally within my taste profiles. It wasn't a very challenging dish. Some of the dishes that I experienced on the continent my first time were challenging, just in the sense of my not being used to them, my not being used to the mouthfeel, my not being used to the texture or the ingredients. But this was familiar and yet different. And so it was kind of lovely for that reason.
Do you think of it as an experience, or maybe it was sort of all wrapped up in those early first visits, but was it an experience, an eating experience that was a turning point for you in terms of?
Absolutely. I think I may have even been totally aware of it at that time. But it was certainly, it was an eating experience that made a difference. It was, the proverbial aha moment. I knew something had changed. The tectonic plates had shifted. So there was something different that had happened.
Yeah. It's funny. Another question that I wanted to ask you, because I recently read your memoir, which of course is called My Soul Looks Back, which is wonderful. But because you just said that about sort of being in that moment and realizing that something was shifting, it's something that I couldn't help but wonder when I was reading the memoir, did you know when you were going through all of those times and all of those moments with all of the people that you were friends with and collaborating with in some cases, like, did you know how important that time period was? Did you have a feeling about that at that time? Or did you gain that perspective through actually looking back on it?
Well, the title of the memoir is My Soul Looks Back. So some of it was looking back. I mean, I think back then, of course, if you were, and I was in my 20s and hanging out with, I always sort of refer to myself as having been the tail of the, the last little part of the tail of the kite that was the friendship among all of those incredible people: James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Nina Simone, back in the 1970s. So yes, I was very much aware they were all who they were then. I mean,
right.
So yes, I was aware that it was special, but the ways in which they perhaps formed me, the ways in which they certainly had an impact on me, I don't think I was aware of that.
Sure. What has it been like for you to see High on the Hog come to life in this way recently?
Interesting. I have said, and I'm quoting myself in a way, I have said it's sort of like giving a child, if you have a book. I've never had a book that went in any kind of way to film or anything. And so it was sort of like giving your child up for adoption. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how people are going to transform it, to deal with it, to adapt it, to change it. I think that, having said that, in terms of the adoption, it was a successful adoption. I have met my child in adulthood after the adoption, and I can still recognize it as my child. And I see, I see some of the points that I had placed carefully in my child, but I also see some of the things that came from its adoptive parents. So it's a very interesting kind of way of seeing things and seeing yourself, seeing your words, your thoughts, your organization interpreted through others' eyes.
Yeah. I mean, I was at the first episode, watching you sort of stroll through the markets in Benin with Stephen Satterfield. I just was thinking, what a wild experience that must be, to sort of be retracing your own steps in many ways with the next generation in that way, and in such a public, sort of observed way.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I am such a market junkie that, the whole idea of the next generation never occurred to me. It's like, I am, well, my mother used to say every morning when she awakened, she was as old, well, as young as she wanted to be and as old as she had to be. And I think that in many ways, that's me in the day. I don't necessarily, I mean, a lot has been made about handing over the baton and, the next generation. I want to be on public notice to everyone. I still have my baton firmly clenched in my hand.
Yes, you do.
Okay, let's be clear about that.
Mm.
When I get ready to hand,
no,
I mean, when I get ready to hand it over, I'll hand it over gladly and willingly. But right now, still firmly clenched. I got lots of plans. I got lots of things I hope to do. Some things I may not get to do. Some things I may get to do, but the baton is firmly clenched. So just putting everybody on notice about that one, okay?
Yeah, let's, we're all excited about that.
But no, it was interesting. I mean, because basically never forget, and I think a lot of people do forget this about me. Up until 2 years ago, when I retired, food, writing, matters culinary were my avocation. I spent 50 years teaching at Queens College, CUNY, in New York. So that's what people forget, So my journey with Stephen into the market and throughout Benin was more me as teacher, me as, professor. I mean, there's a point at which somebody, I was watching the first episode with someone and they looked at the scene in the yams and they said, Socratic method, huh? But what do you do with this? How do you do this? Where, these are things that are natural to me, so that that was the journey. It was more about teaching something to someone about something that I knew. I mean, I love that market, the Tokpa. I can't say I am familiar with it now as I used to be, but I used to go with, I can't say, I didn't go necessarily every year, even every other year, but I went with enough frequency so that I knew turn this way or turn that way for this thing if I entered a particular way, so that, it was kind of home.
Yeah. Something I've been curious about, sort of coming to the end of my book writing process, and which I'm sure a lot of authors go through, but since this is my first book, I'm experiencing it for the first time, is sort of that feeling of what comes next at the end of this big
postpartum depression.
Exactly. And you've written so much, and you've written so many books, and I wondered how you feel when you finish a book, and if sort of during the process of writing one book you have the seed of the next idea, or if it comes in a different way for you.
Um, okay. First of all, in terms of that, how do you feel when you finish?
Mhm.
I think the first book that I ever wrote was a result of that feeling after finishing my doctoral dissertation. So it was
Which was
always
on
there.
the theater of West
My,
Africa, right?
yeah, the French speaking theater of Senegal was the topic of the dissertation. But with that, each book, when I finished Hot Stuff, which was my first book, I knew that I wanted to write Iron Pots and Wooden Spoons, which was my second book. And then Iron Pots and Wooden Spoons kind of started a culinary journey, basically, in that it sort of started to define what we now call the African Atlantic world, and it started to look at it from a culinary perspective. And then pretty much after that, everything was like, oh, let's look at this stuff. Haven't thought about that. Let's go there. And, so a lot of it was just organic in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, then there were other things that came up and came along. I did a book on third world women's beauty secrets. I did a French textbook about French as spoken outside of France. I did a couple of translations. I did a guidebook to France and a guidebook to Paris that I edited. And so, there were things that were kind of not in the culinary range either, so that there are
Right.
all kinds of different things, so lots of stuff.
And so you sort of prevented yourself from feeling that feeling at the end of a book by always having a next idea. I'm getting that from you.
Well, yeah. And I mean, right now, for example, I am working on a book, have actually sold the book after that and possibly the book after that. So I'm planning to stay around for a while.
A few things to
also, it's just, people sort of say, my God, you're prolific. It's like, overactive mind and no social life. And that kind of sums it up.
Yeah. Well, lucky for all of us that's how you exert your energy. I'm glad you brought up Paris, because I know that that's a big part of your life. And I was wondering, with the pandemic, obviously it's been so hard for everyone not to be able to travel, but since travel has been such a huge part of your life, how you've been managing not to be able to travel, and if you have any big plans on the horizon.
Well, not to be able to travel, how I've managed that in a word is badly. I hope to, soon as I feel comfortable, and I'm not sure I feel comfortable enough yet, but I will be going to my happy place. But equally, I have discovered the wonderful world of WhatsApp. And so I lived with a family. I did a junior year in France, and I lived with a family, and then went back 20 years after the junior year and found them again. And
Wow.
so now they've become my family. I literally go to their family reunion. I know the next generation. And it's a great story. And they are part of what sustained me during the pandemic, because they were sequestered, I was sequestered, and what we would do would be, we'd talk to each other on WhatsApp. We would, the equivalent of FaceTime. I have what I considered, I'm an only child, so I have an international family. I just was on WhatsApp with a girlfriend in London today. I've sent messages to my family in Benin because there's an event on Saturday that I want them to attend. My adopted godson in Brazil is, well, he's from Brazil, but he is peripatetic as well. So he's leaving Serbia to go to Jordan. He works for the UN. So I am, I sort of follow the sun, and that was kind of a great thing because, I, like many people during the pandemic, wasn't sleeping particularly well. So it's like, okay, friends in China are up. Okay, I can
Who can
call
I
these
call?
people now. And so I would go all the way around, and then it was finally West Coast folks. And then by that time, I was tired enough to go to sleep. So
That
I
is
would
so
follow
great.
the sun.
Did you cook at all with people virtually or eat at all?
I had I had three virtual things. I have dear friends in Oxford, Mississippi, and we had a virtual dinner every Thursday, and
Oh, that's so cool.
sort of FaceTime kind of thing. And at some point, they sort of said, "Well, you plan the menu, and we'll cook it." So that made lazy me have to do things, but we would find that, for about a month or two there, we were eating the same thing. And then I had girlfriend dinners. One I organized with some friends, again in Mississippi, in Jackson. And then another girlfriend that I would have a drink with, as it were, every Wednesday. So I live by myself. I love my cats wildly and madly, and I had taken Cat 101, for the first half of the pandemic, and now speak fluent cat. But Cat 202 was sort of not the course I wanted to take. So that was when I sort of started saying, okay, we need to reach out to some
Time to
humans.
branch out.
Yeah, time for humans, So
Yes.
that worked.
Lindsay, we're
It's
going
been
to take some
really,
questions. We would have just
oh,
stopped.
sure,
I
sure.
want to remind our attendees that we do want to take questions from you. I have three, so I'm going to just start a few and open the conversation. We'll
Sure,
keep going.
absolutely.
But because you were talking about the seed and what's next with books with Jessica, we did have a question. Somebody said, this is your first book. What's the seed for the next book?
Well, man, I really set myself up for that one, didn't I? I don't know what's next. And, I think a goal of mine would be to illustrate a cookbook. That's definitely something that I want to do. I think it speaks to this community of women that I have had the honor of talking with the last few years, that I have spent this much time talking with people, and I am not tired of it, and that there's so many more questions and more people that I would love to talk to. So I don't think that I'm done with this topic, but I don't know what format that will take for me.
Well, then I would follow through with the second part of that question, which is, would you write recipe for the cookbook, or would you collaborate?
I mean, I could write some recipes. I'm not sure that people would want to cook them and eat them.
Well,
I would love to collaborate with someone who's more qualified than I am to do that.
okay, we'll put the word out.
Yes.
We're starting. We have a nice audience, captive audience here.
Yeah.
About that, I have a question for both of you. Madame d'Escoffier is all about lifting women up and helping them achieve their goals at any age and stage. I want to really underscore that. We do not support ageism. We want to support inclusivity at every aspect for all women. Based on that, what do you think some of the, and based on the people you both have met in your extensive research in your respective roles, who would you like to, what movements or individuals are doing things that are of interest that we should be keeping our radar on that we may not have on our radar yet? Lindsay, you brought up a lot in your book, and Jessica, you travel extensively and know so many. So I'd like to pose that question to both of you.
Do you want to field that question first, Dr. Harris?
No, you go, and I'll.
Okay. Well, let's see. There are so many. One organization that comes to mind is Black Wine Professionals, Julia Coney, who I talked with on Instagram a couple of months ago, and she's also in Why We Cook. I think there are so many organizations that are not only supporting the work of women in terms of creating and supporting platforms for women, but also women who have been underrepresented for so long. And those are the organizations and the groups that I think are really inspiring right now. I mean, there's also so much good work coming out in writing. Recently, there's a book, Natalie Bazile, We Are Each Other's Harvest,
yeah.
Which is incredible. Leah Penniman is in Why We Cook, and she's been doing her work for, 15 years at Soulfire Farm. She's definitely one to follow. There are so many, that's just a few that come to mind.
Well, we are of like mind, because I was going to mention Natalie's book, but also talk about the whole idea of Black farmers, and particularly Black women farmers, and how that works, and all of the people who are doing new things like the Black women foragers, the Black women doulas who are using food and medicinal things. So I think there are all of those things to be able to begin to look at as well. I think First Nation peoples are definitely folks who need to be looked at and lifted up in this time. I think that, we don't spend enough time looking at the traditional ways, and particularly the traditional women's ways of those groups. And I think all of those things are very important.
Absolutely. Actually, thank you for bringing that up. There is a chef, Hillel Echohawk, in Why We Cook, who is part of a group of Indigenous chefs, Collective. I don't know if any of their members are here tonight, but they're working across the country in preserving Indigenous foodways and educating. And they all of the members have different roles, but their work is really, really, really great. And definitely agree. There are so many. I mean, my Instagram feed is filled with incredible small farms, and especially women farmers that are doing some really profound work right now. It's exciting.
It is. I wish there was a directory of all of this so we could find them easily, because I think we all want to locate and support these. There was another interesting essay by a New York Dom, Amanda Cohen, in the book that I'm going to have you also both speak to. It's called The Invisible Woman. And it reflects back to the statistic that we're many women who are cooking, but we still don't get the recognition that the men get. We're getting better, but it's not there yet. And Amanda writes about it in The Invisible Woman, and very poetically and emphatically, and refers to the fame of Anthony. But she says, I blame Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, published in 2000. His book made cooking cool, but it also implied that kitchens were all about tattoos, heroin, rowdy, binge drinking, and loud boys, on and on. Women, I think, do it more elegantly. We're better behaved, but what can we do to raise the ability of women in all backgrounds and levels? I'll ask both of you that.
So many things. We can do so many things. We can give women loans. We can help them find investors. We can continue to give them the microphone and encourage them to share their stories. I think, as is always the case, storytelling breeds empathy. And I think that the more we tell our stories, the more we share our stories, the more power we will have. And I don't think we have to wait for other people to give that to us.
I think, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I would also say, just be, assume the power that is inherent in being a woman in the world. Just assume it. Don't assume that it's got to be a negative or a diminishment. There's nothing that says that that is essential. It doesn't have to be. And perhaps, and I do understand that it's perhaps, but perhaps by assuming that it isn't, it won't be.
There's a quote I love. It's called, "You must begin by knowing you've already arrived." And I think if we start at the point of our strengths and always stand from a point of our strengths and the foundation of that, we will rise, and our whisks will be our baton. As you say, you still have your baton and we have ours, and we can let that be the guide to future generations, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
We have, we're at 7:52. I want to just see if any of our audience would like to pose some questions to our two speakers. I've been asking them all, but we'd love to take some more questions. Does anybody have questions? We have a hand raised. Okay. I don't know what it is. I need somebody to feed it to. Joyce. Joyce, do you have it?
I don't have Pauline's. If she could put it in the chat. What we do have.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you guys doing?
Good. Tell us your question.
So thank you for putting this forum together. It's very exciting to see Helen Harris and I in the same forum. And Lindsay, I just admire your work. So Helen, I did watch High on Hog, and I am born and raised in Africa, Kenya to be precise. And I have been very fortunate. I have visited every continent and many, many, many countries in those continents. I also just finished writing a book. So mine is not really a question rather than a comment. And when you said, you know, when you are writing a book and you finish penning off everything, or maybe you now hand it off to the editors, it's exciting. An idea kind of pops in your head. And my book is on Africa Eats, traditional and ancient African food in a modern kitchen. So I'm excited that hopefully I could put a copy in your hand and you give me your honest and true and feedback, good or bad, in hope that it will make my second book, Street Foods of Africa, more interesting and a better work than my first one. But thank you for all you do for the women in food. Melanie, you just said something very important that I think as women we need to think of before you begin, that you've actually arrived. You know, when I was writing my book, my mother kept on telling me, remember and remember and remember, always tilt a fellow woman's hat, crown, hat, or scarf, so your path may be cleared. So Melanie, what you've just said really will sit and resonate with me. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. It's really important that we build each other up. We have a question. Was there anything on High on the Hog book that got left out of the series you'd like to have seen? I guess that's Jessica.
Well, High on the Hog, as it is the 4-part docu-series that is currently out, only deals with the first half of the book. So there's the second half of the book.
Yeah, I didn't want it to end. It felt like it wasn't enough.
Well, theoretically, there may be a second season. I don't know that anybody knows anything about that, but if there is, it'll deal with the second, or at least part of the second half of the book.
My fingers are crossed.
Probably
There
so.
are many.
It's pretty good. That's great. Does anyone have any other questions? In there, Joyce, do you have any? My colleague Joyce is also forwarding.
Yes, so we have a couple that were sent in. The first one is sort of a question, but it's a memory for Dr. Harris. It's from Marcy Verplag, who wants to know if you still have the red cowboy boots you bought at IACP in San Antonio when you both skipped a session.
I do.
You
They
devil.
were rocket busters, and I still have them. And in fact, they are with me on the vineyard.
And then she asks, in the many addresses you presented to our culinary groups, should we have done more than just view your message as more than our aha moments? If we had done more, would much be different now, or did our culture and society need to reach this state of affairs in 2021 in order for Netflix High on the Hog to become this impactful call for action?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, when the cookbooks were inducted in the Cookbook Hall of Fame, which was 2019, I said I was in food when food wasn't cool. I was in food when food wasn't diverse. And just to add to it, I was in Les Dames, New York, when they didn't do any events below Midtown. Yeah, I think that a lot took a lot of time. I may be the first or second Black person who was inducted into Les Dames. I've never really checked on that, but I was in it for a long, long time when there were no other no other Black Americans in Les Dames. I think we are at a moment, and I think that moment is opening doors for a variety of people across the board. And I think that it is just a glorious thing to watch and to be able to witness. So, there has been change. I think this moment is bringing us to change.
It's a pivotal moment. I know that Madame Descoffier is very committed to supporting and increasing and diversifying its membership. And, even when I was first put forth, I was rejected because I was in public relations. So, it's grown quite a bit since then in terms of the scope of how women touch so many areas of the industry. Now we have women who are in the spirits business, wine.
Oh, I know.
Education. Thank goodness. But it does take the conversation and the effort to do that. Joyce, do we have some other questions?
We do, and before I ask the next question, I do want to let everyone know that there is movement. Kimberly Brock Brown is the first female to become president of the American Chefs Federation. She is Black and a pastry chef, and is the first woman to take the helm for the 14,000 members in the United States. So I do think, we are making changes, and our voices are going to be heard and listened to as more women follow in Jessica's and Lindsay's footsteps to become leaders in the industry.
It takes a community.
It's a community. So Mara Wasowski said, Dr. Harris was often a guest speaker for her NYU class on food, culture, and identity in New Orleans. You made such an enduring and important mark as a teacher on my graduate students and me in even those brief encounters. So much gratitude to you. Glad your baton is still firmly in hand.
Thank you. But the teacher in me would go, that's not a question.
Yes. And so we have one more from MVV. Hello, everyone, and Dr. Harris. Not a question, but a thank you. I met you 10 years ago with Clifford Wright. I had a fascination for okra. Your kind words that night and your writing encouraged that. I am now in New Orleans growing heirloom varieties, including one called Louisiana 16-inch long. Yes, 16-inch long pods. Thank you for the inspiration, and it has been wonderful seeing your beautiful face once again, Michelle Van Villay. Okay, we have one more question. Lindsay, what do you hope your children will take away from this book when they are older? And what messages do you recommend we take from it to share with the women in our lives? From Francine Cohen. Yeah.
Just a small question.
And a good one to wrap up because we're at an hour. So I think this is a really important question to summarize
That
this.
is.
Because it is about passing the baton.
My children were a huge inspiration for writing this book, and they're often in the kitchen with me, either experimenting on their own or learning or teaching me, honestly. It was wonderful to sort of share the experience of researching, learning about book writing, illustrating, the whole experience I shared with my family. And I'm not only glad that they have the result to take with them as a book, but I'm also really glad that they got to witness the process of me working really hard for 3 years on this project, and being inspired by all of the women that it brought me in contact with. They learned about what that was like, and they got to see how the book came together. So that's one part of what I hope they take out of it. The other part of what I hope they take out of it is what I hope everyone takes out of this book and gets from reading it, which is that I hope people understand that this is, while it includes a huge number of incredible women, it's also just the tip of the iceberg of what is happening and will happen, and that these women are changing the narrative. They are shaping the culinary world as we know it, and that world influences so much of the rest of the world that we experience. I know that my relationship to cooking and food has changed in the last 3 years. I think that a big part of what was at the heart of my inspiration for asking these questions was wanting to feel more connected to what I was doing. And I have a different sense of sort of being in community, being connected, a different sense of solidarity when I'm in the kitchen, when I'm researching and buying ingredients, when I'm reading cookbooks, when I'm learning about different people and different foods. So all of that is a result of this process for me, and I hope that other people feel inspired to ask their own questions. Food is part of all of our lives every single day, and there's so much to look deeper in cooking about. I think there's so many questions to ask. So I say this in the book, but I hope that you read the book and have more questions than when you started.
Lindsay, that's a great way to summarize. We've come to the end of this talk. First of all, Lindsay Gardner, thank you for being here and for writing your book, Why We Cook. Thank you to Workman for offering all of our attendees a 20% discount on their website. You should all have a link to it. Dr. Jessica B. Harris, thank you for taking your time to join us and share your wisdom, and congratulations on all your success and the recent acclaim for the Netflix series High on the Hog, which the New York Times said is an incredible reframing of a history that reintroduces the United States to viewers through the lens of Black people's food, which is to say American food. Very important. Lindsay, I think you summarized this quite well. When you leave this event, I want you to all ask yourself the question, why do I cook? How can I make what I do more meaningful and impactful to help everyone and all women? Because it's the why in our life that drives the how we do it and what we do. And that's our call to action as we leave this event. Lindsay, thank you for raising the question. I'm sure there will be more questions asked in future books. It was your first book. It was a terrific book. Let's give a hand to an author for her first book.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a big accomplishment. And let's give a hand to Dr. Jessie B. Harris, because Dr. Harris, you continue to inspire. You raise that baton and you keep waving it. We can't see what you're going to be doing in the next stage of your next chapter. Thank you. much. And thank you again to all the attendees. Again, our Instagram is LDNY. The website is ldny.org. Lindsay is, Dr. Jessica B. Harris is Dr. Jessica B. Harris at Instagram. Lindsay is Lindsay Gardner Art. Please check out her beautiful art at her
Oh, they're
website.
amazing.
It's spectacular.
Thank you.
And for all of you, we hope this is impressed, inspired. Find your why, act on it, and be the change you want to see in the world of women today. Thank you all on behalf of La Dame d'Escoffier, New York.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lindsay. Take care.
Thanks, Dr. Harris.
Bye.
Bye.